Hi, in today's story I'm going to be reading a chapter from this book, The Twighlight Saga, New Moon. Chapter 1, Party. I was 99.9% sure I was dreaming. The reasons I was so certain were that first, I was standing in a bright shaft of sunlight with kind of blinding clear sun that never shone on my drizzly new hometown of Forks. And second, I was looking at my grandma Marie. Gran had been dead for 6 years now, so that was solid evidence towards the dream theory. Gran hadn't changed much. Her face looked just the same as I remembered it. The skin was soft and withered, bent into 1,000 tiny creases that clung gently to the bone underneath, like a dried apricot, but with a puff of thick white hair standing out in a cloud around it. Our mouths, hers, a wizened pucker spread into the same surprised half smile at just the same time. Apparently, she hadn't been expecting to see me either. I was about to ask her a question. I had so many. What was she doing here in my dream? What had she been up to in the past 6 years? Was Pop okay? And had they found each other, wherever they were? But she opened her mouth when I did, so I stopped to let her go first. She paused too, and then we both smiled at a little awkwardness. Bella? It wasn't Gran who called my name, and we both turned to see the addition to our small reunion. I didn't have to look to know who it was. This was a voice I would know anywhere, know and respond to, whether I was awake or asleep, or even dead, I'd bet. The voice I'd walk through fire for, or less dramatically, slosh every day through the cold and endless rain for, Edward. Even though I was thrilled to see him, conscious or otherwise, and even though I was almost positive that I was dreaming, I panicked as Edward walked towards us through the glaring sunlight. I panicked because Gran didn't know that I was in love with a vampire. Nobody knew that, so how was I supposed to explain the fact that the brilliant sunbeams were shattering off his skin into 1,000 rainbow shards, like it was made of crystal or diamond? Well, Gran, you might have noticed that my boyfriend glitters. It's just something that he does in the sun. Don't worry about it. What was he doing? The whole reason he lived in Forks, the rainiest place in the world, was so that he could be outside in the daytime without exposing his family's secret. Yet here he was, strolling gracefully towards me, with the most beautiful smile on his angel's face, as if I were the only one here. In that second, I wish that I was not the one exception to his mysterious talent. I usually felt grateful that I was the only person whose thoughts he couldn't hear just as clearly as if they were spoken aloud. But now I wish you could hear me too, so that you could hear the warning I was screaming in my head. I shot a panicked glance back at Gran and saw that it was too late. She was just turning to stare back at me, her eyes as alarmed as mine. Edward, still smiling so beautifully that my heart felt like it was going to swell up and burst through my chest, put his arm around my shoulder and turned to face my grandmother. Gran's expression surprised me. Instead of looking horrified, she was staring at me sheepishly, as if waiting for a scolding, and she was standing in such a strange position, one arm held awkwardly away from her body, stretched out and then curled around the air, like she had her arm around someone I couldn't see, someone invisible. Only then, as I looked at the bigger picture, did I notice the huge gilt frame that enclosed my grandmother's form. Uncomprehending, I raised the hand that wasn't wrapped around Edward's waist and reached out to touch her. She mimicked the movement exactly, mirrored it. But where our fingers should have met, there was nothing but cold glass. With a dizzying jolt, my dream abruptly became a nightmare. There was no Gran. That was me. Me in a mirror. Me, ancient, creased and withered. Edward stood beside me, casting no reflection, excruciatingly lovely, and forever 17. He pressed his icy perfect lips against my wasted cheek. "Happy birthday," he whispered. I woke with a start, my eyelids popping open wide, and gasped. Dull grey light, familiar light of an overcast morning, took the place of the blinding sun in my dream. Just a dream, I told myself. It was only a dream. I took a deep breath and then jumped again when my alarm went off. The little calendar in the corner of my clock's display informed me that today was September the 13th. Only a dream, but prophetic enough in one way at least. Today was my birthday. I was officially 18 years old. I'd been dreading this day for months. All through the perfect summer, the happiest summer I've ever had. The happiest summer anyone, anywhere had ever had. And the rainiest summer in the history of the Olympic Peninsula. This bleak date had lurked in ambush, waiting to spring. And now that it had hit, it was even worse than I'd feared it would be. I could feel it. I was older. Every day I got older. But this was different, worse, quantifiable. I was 18, and Edward never would be. When I went to brush my teeth, I almost surprised the face in the mirror hadn't changed. I stared at myself, looking for some sign of impending wrinkles in my ivory skin. The only creases were the ones on my forehead though, and I knew that if I could manage to relax, that would disappear. I couldn't. My eyebrows stayed lodged in a worried line of my anxious brown eyes. It was just a dream, I reminded myself again. Just a dream, but also my worst nightmare. I skipped breakfast, in a hurry to get out of the house as quickly as possible. I wasn't entirely able to avoid my dad, and so I had to spend a few minutes acting cheerful. I honestly tried to be excited about the gifts I'd asked him not to get me, but every time I had to smile. It felt like I might start crying. I struggled to get a grip on myself as I drove to school. The vision of Gran, I would not think of it as me, was hard to get out of my head. I couldn't feel anything but despair until I pulled into the familiar parking lot behind Forks High School and spotted Edward leaning motionless against his polished silver Volvo. Like a marble tribute to some forgotten pagan god of beauty, the dream had not done him justice, and he was waiting there for me, just the same as every other day. Despair momentarily vanished. Wonder took its place. Even after half a year with him, I still couldn't believe that I deserved this degree of good fortune. His sister Alice was standing by his side, waiting for me too. Of course, Alice and Edward weren't really related. In Forks, the story was all about the Cullen siblings, how they were adopted by Dr. Carlisle Cullen and his wife, Esme, both painfully young to have teenage children. But their skin was precisely the same pale shade. Their eyes had the same strange golden tint, with the same deep bruise-like shadows beneath them. Her face, like this, was also startlingly beautiful. To someone in the know, someone like me, these similarities marked them for what they are. The sight of Alice waiting there, her tawny eyes brilliant with excitement, and small silver-wrapped square in her hands made me frown. I told Alice I didn't want anything, not gifts or even attention, for my birthday. Obviously, my wishes were being ignored. I slammed the door of my '53 Chevy truck. A shower of rust specks fluttered over the wet blacktop, and walked slowly towards where they waited. Alice skipped forward to meet me, her pixie face glowing under her spiky black hair. "Happy birthday, Bella." "Shh," I hissed, glancing around a lot to make sure no one had heard her. The last thing I wanted was some kind of celebration of the black event. She ignored me. "Do you want to open your present now or later?" she asked eagerly as we made our way to where Edward still waited. "No presents," I protested in a mumble. She finally seemed to process my mood. "Okay, later. Do you like the scrapbook your mum sent you? And the camera from Charlie?" I sighed. Of course she would know what my birthday presents were. Edward wasn't the only member of his family with unusual skills. Alice would have seen what my parents were planning as soon as they decided that themselves. "Yeah, they're great." "I think it's a nice idea. You're only a senior once. Might as well document the experience." "How many times have you been a senior? That's different." We reached Edward, then he held out his hand for mine. I took it eagerly, forgetting for a moment my glum mood. His skin, as always, smooth, hard and very cold. He gave my fingers a gentle squeeze. I looked into his liquid topaz eyes, and my heart gave a not quite so gentle squeeze of its own. Hearing the stutter in my heartbeats, he smiled again. He lifted his free hand and traced one cool fingertip around the outside of my lips as he spoke. So, as discussed, I'm not allowed to wish you a happy birthday. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. I could never quite mimic the flow of his perfect, formal articulation. It was something that could only be picked up in an earlier century. Just checking. He ran his hand through his tousled bronze hair. You might have changed your mind. Most people seem to enjoy things like birthdays and gifts. Alice laughed, and the sound was all silver. A wind chime. Of course you'll enjoy it. Everyone is supposed to be nice to you today and give you your way, Bella. What's the worst that could happen? She meant it as a rhetorical question. Getting older, I answered anyway, and my voice was not as steady as I wanted it to be. Beside me, Edward's smile tightened into a hard line. 18 isn't very old, Alice said. Don't women usually wait till they're 29 to get upset over birthdays? It's older than Edward, I mumbled. He sighed. Technically, she said, keeping her tone light, just by 1 little year, though. And I suppose if I could be sure of the future I wanted, sure, I would want to spend forever with Edward, and Alice and the rest of the Cullens, probably not as a wrinkled little old lady. Then a year or two, one direction or the other, wouldn't matter to me so much. But Edward was dead set against my future that changed me. Any future that made me like him, and that made me immortal too. An impasse, he called it. I couldn't really see Edward's point, to be honest. What was so great about mortality? Being a vampire didn't look like such a terrible thing. Not the way the Cullens did it, anyway. What time will you be at the house? Alice continued, changing the subject. From her expression, she was up to exactly the kind of thing I've been hoping to avoid. I didn't know I had plans to be there. Oh, be fair, Bella, she complained. You aren't going to ruin all of the fun like that, are you? I thought my birthday was about what I want. I'll get her from Charlie's right after school. Edward told her, ignoring me altogether. I have to work, I protested. You don't, actually, Alice told me smugly. I already spoke to Mrs. Newton about it. She's trading your shifts. She said to tell you happy birthday. I must admit, I've really enjoyed reading that. So that was a chapter from the Twighlight Saga, The New Moon. Hope you've enjoyed that too. All I would normally ask is please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just give us a quick thumbs up. Thanks for joining me today.